Welcome to Wealth Creation Thursdays, a conversation about money matters with me, your host, Wangare. And the sponsor of today's video is Making Sense. It's a book on real-life personal stories of people and their money journey that has been authored by Waceke Nduati. And on today's conversation, we'll be talking about budgeting for beginners. Let's talk about when it comes to financial freedom, when it comes to wealth creation, what is the fundamentals of personal finance? It has different aspects, but on today's conversation, we'll focus on budgeting for beginners. And the first question is, what is a budget? Ideally, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. And in the book, on page 49, Waceke shares that when you have a budget, you tell your money where to go rather than wonder where it went. Because more often than not, you have a money and then you spend your money, and sometimes you could just be going about your daily activities, and probably in the beginning of the day you had 1,000 in your wallet. By the time you're getting back home, you have 200, 100 shillings, and you're like, someone must have pickpocketed me. If at all you're not being deliberate and intentional about where your money is going, then there are loopholes when it comes to your finances. So the question now begs to ask is, what should you do when it comes to budgeting? What entails a good budget? What are some of the things that you need to pay attention to so that you could have a really good budget and a budget that works for you? And even when you have these conversations on personal finance, you need to know that my finances, or how I handle my finances, could be different from how you handle your finances. And this is because my life circumstances could be different from your life circumstances. My earning potential is different from your earning potential. So with very many things to consider, that would make it different from a person to person, individual to individual. The first thing that you need to know when it comes to budgeting is, one, you must track your expenses. You cannot budget before tracking your expenses. And what do we mean by tracking your expenses? Tracking your expenses means that you need to know exactly where each and every coin that you have goes to. For example, like in the beginning of the day, as an individual, I usually have an app, and in this app I will put in how much have I spent on transportation, how much have I spent in the supermarket, how much have I spent on food, on airtime, Wi-Fi, when I make payments for Wi-Fi. So at the end of the day, I know exactly where my money went. At the end of the week, I know exactly where my money went. And at the end of the month, I know exactly where my money went. So it is very important for you to track your expenses before you actually create a budget. And to create a budget, ensure that you're tracking your expenses on a month-to-month basis, and give it like 3 months, because in 3 months you'll be able to figure out, I spend maybe 10,000 shillings on groceries. I usually spend maybe 15,000 shillings on shopping at the supermarket. So even by the time that you are creating a budget, you can be able to say with certainty that I usually spend roughly 10,000 shillings when it comes to groceries. So ensure that you track your expenses. And even when you're tracking your expenses, also, there's a blind spot that many people have, and that is when it comes to their transactional costs. So ensure that you've put everything that you spend your money on, and also know how much you spend on transactional fees, so that you can also make a wise decision on how do I maybe spend less on transactional charges, or which also organizations, banks, because I know that there are banks that when you're sending money from bank maybe to somebody's maybe mobile money, the transaction is actually zero. So when you are able to track your expenses, they say that awareness is the greatest agent of change. So when you are aware of where your money is going, when you're aware of your money habits, then you're able to make sound financial decisions. The second thing that you need to know about a budget is that a budget should not be rigid. A budget should be able to reflect your life situation. And this is what I mean. Maybe my budget for January could look different from my budget for February, my budget for March. Let's say in the month of January, you are living alone. And maybe in March, now you're living maybe with your significant other, or probably you got married, or you're now living with your sibling. It means in that household, how much you used to spend on groceries, of course, will change. How much you used to spend on water bill, of course, will change. So ensure that your budget reflects your actual circumstances on a month-to-month basis. The other thing that you need to know on budget is you need to determine your priorities. Let's say, for example, you're looking maybe to buy something new in your home, or you're looking to maybe start a new project, you're looking to do something, and you're looking to customize your budget in a way that gives you enough leeway to be able to get money to fund a particular project. So this means that probably you want to focus more on savings and investments. And if at all you have a good budget, if at all you've been tracking your expenses, what now that means, it will show you what are some of the loopholes that you have. Maybe it's you spend maybe 20,000 shillings just on eating out. You could now, with the information that you got from tracking your expenses, you could decide that I'm going to reduce it from 20,000 to 10,000 shillings. And now that extra amount can now go into an emergency fund. It can go into savings and investments. So a budget also enables you to determine what you need to figure out what your priorities are and tie that in to how you are creating your budget. The fourth thing that you need to know is a budget needs to be realistic. And this means that you should not overestimate or not underestimate. And that is why I've mentioned that it is important for you to actually track your expenses for a couple of months before deciding that when it comes to my budget, I'm going to put, let's say, eating out at this amount of money. If in the month of January, February, March, your eating out has been averaging 15,000 to 20,000, then you setting aside, let's say, 10,000 shillings as the budget for that particular month, it would mean that you'd actually go over budget if at all your habits have not changed. So ensure that your budget is realistic. If at all you spend 20,000 on groceries, let it over time. If at all you've been spending this money over time, let it also reflect in the months to come, if at all your circumstances have not changed. So budget should be realistic, and it needs to, and make sure that you're not overestimating or underestimating. The other thing that you need to know is that a budget will give you awareness of your loopholes. And I need to admit something. When I started tracking my expenses, when I began budgeting, like, the tracking of my expenses was the most difficult thing that I did, because what it did, it made me face the woman in the mirror. And also Waceke shares that in her book, that in order for you to make progress, you need to see yourself for truly who you are. You need to be able, and it was very painful for me to see that I'm actually spending a lot of money on this particular area. In the end, the amount of money I'm making, it doesn't make sense. It made me realize, I need to make more money, that I'm broke, and it now brings about the question of what are you going to do to be able to mitigate this particular reality of your life. So tracking your expenses will feel uncomfortable the first few months, but what I will urge you is just stick to it. Before you know it, it will become a habit, and as you continue to do it, you'll feel like you have control, because if at all you do not know exactly how much you're spending your money, where your money is going, you feel out of control. And when you feel out of control, you feel helpless and you're like, why bother? But the moment that you put systems and structures in place, when you feel like, yes, I'm able to steer this wheel in the right direction, then it also gives you hope that you could actually do better with your finances. So those are things that you need to pay attention to. And the next thing that I'd like to talk to you guys about is the 3 types of expenses. So we've talked about tracking your expenses, but right now we want to have the conversation of what are some of the types of expenses that we have. The first type of expense is the A expense. And A expense refers to the expenses that are essential. And these are food, this is shelter, this is water, this is electricity. And disclaimer, all foods is not essential. You ordering in is not essential, but the food that you cook in your own home, that's essential. Because if at all now you're ordering, food from your favorite restaurant, day in, day out, that 1,000 shillings here, 1,000 shillings there, it actually adds up and it could blow things off. So essential A expenses are your essential expenses. B expenses are the non-essential but important. And this is like gym membership. Like for me, I love keeping fit, and gym membership it's not essential. It's important, yes, but it's non-essential. It could mean if things get hard, I could consider running on the road. I could consider doing my yoga in my own home. I could consider exercising, at home. So it means that you could keep fit, but in a way that does not cost money when things become difficult. So we have the A expenses, as I've said, which is essential. B expense, which is non-essential but important to you. And 3 is everything else. Now this looks like your subscription, to your entertainment apps. Now this looks like your in-purchase apps. These are everything else. And how do you know what's essential and what's non-essential? I would want you to imagine a case scenario. Let's say, for example, like even during COVID, people's salary was slashed by 50%. If today your salary was slashed by 50%, if it was slashed by 60%, then what are some of the things you'd be like, this I must keep, and this automatically goes out of the window. If it's your manicure and pedicure, of course it goes out of the window. If it's eating out, that automatically goes out of the window. So the things that actually will have to remain, those are your essential, and the things that will actually have to leave, now those are your non-essential. And when it comes to budgeting, people think budgeting is about knowing what your needs are or knowing what your expenses are, knowing what your needs are. But when it comes to creating a budget, there are 5 key elements that needs to be showcased for it to be a proper and functioning budget. Number 1, a good budget must have a slot for savings and investments. And there's a reason as to why I have said this as the first thing. If you take nothing else from this video, take this. You need to pay yourself first. Whenever money hits your account, whenever you are paid, either by your employer, whether it's a gig that you've gotten, you must always pay yourself first. And how do you pay yourself first? You pay yourself first by savings and investing. And Waceke, in her book, she talks about building your factory. And she talks about whose factory are you building? The moment that you have your money and the first person that you're paying is your landlord, then you're building your landlord's factory. If the next person that you're paying is supermarket, you've added to cart, it's now the delivery is now at your home, it's that supermarket owner whose factory you're building. Then who will come and build your own factory? If at all you're not paying yourself first, then nobody will be building your factory for you. So it's important for you to first save and invest and pay yourself first through savings and investing. The second thing that needs to be featured in your budget is your needs. So how much are you spending on groceries? How much are you spending on rent? How much are you spending on whatever that essential looks like for you. The third thing that it should have is your wants. So these are eating out, your entertainment budget. So a good budget has savings and investments. It needs to show how much goes into needs, how much goes into wants. It also needs to show how much goes into debt. If at all you are taking up new debt, what does monthly payments look like? If at all you already have an ongoing debt, how much are you putting aside to be able to pay down that debt? And last but not least, the next thing that a good budget should have is miscellaneous expenses. And let's say, for example, maybe your favorite content creator is having a masterclass. And let's say this is a masterclass that she's thought about having in the last 2 weeks, and you hadn't planned prior when you're actually creating your January budget. So it's important that you have maybe an extra 5,000 shillings, an extra 10,000 shillings for miscellaneous expenses in case something comes up, because sometimes things happen, life happens. So it is important that you put that in mind. So I'm going to just go through again. A good budget does not only have your expenses. A good budget has one, savings and investing, which features your because you must always pay yourself first. You must always build your own factory. It must feature your needs. It must feature your wants. It must feature your debt. And it must feature your miscellaneous expenses. And as I've mentioned before, these conversations are powered by the Making Sense book, which is the book that has been authored by Waceke. You can get it directly from us at 1,000 shillings, or you can get it from our bookshop partners, Textbook Center, Nuria, Half Priced Bookshop, Prestige Bookshop, Somanami, Kibanga Books, Bookstop Yaya Center, Sparkle Bookstop, and Aristoc Booklex Uganda. Thank you for being here. Till next time, kwaherini.